they realize, hey, the investment for digital is oftentimes significantly less than the investment for conferences and trade shows, and the ROI is about the same or better. And so when you think of it from that perspective, a lot of companies, I think, are still going to go back and add in a conference or a trade show here and there. Don't get me wrong, I think they're still really, really good for a well-rounded program. But I think that it's going to be less, and you're going to see a lot more companies invest in digital, especially when it comes to content and social and trying to leverage social.
Hi there, this is Andrei, and you are on a new episode of the Marketing Innovation Podcast Show. Our special guest today is Raffan, the CEO of Content Callout and a successful podcast host himself. He turns B2B brands into category thought leaders through little-known content marketing strategies, which is exactly what we'll be discussing today. So without further ado, Mark, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Pumped to see how our discussion goes and what secrets we find from you. How are you? How's the morning been for you?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, Andrei. I appreciate it.
Pleasure is all mine. Looking forward to catching up on the geeky stuff here in the B2B content marketing subject line.
Let's do it.
First of all, let's start with a quick introduction. So our listeners here can get to know you a little bit and, for them to know you as a person and what was your journey as a marketing leader and then entrepreneur, as well as podcaster. If not, we can talk about your podcast as well, because I had a look at some of the episodes and they are pretty cool. Why not talk about that as well?
Sure. Thank you very much. So my background is actually not in marketing. I actually come from a sales and procurement background. That's where I spent most of my career. And then 5 years ago, started a company called Negotiations Ninja, which is a negotiation training and coaching business, which also has a podcast. And that's how we gained notoriety. That's how we built our thought leadership. That's how we grew that brand, is through the podcast. And then just over 2 years ago, we started Content Callout because we thought, hey, if we can do it for one brand, I bet we could do it for other brands too. So we started Content Callout with the intention of building that for other companies. And so now we do B2b content marketing, which is basically anything in and around the content space. So if you think of blogs, white papers, case studies, anything that's written on social media, any kind of social media management, and then also any kind of video content. What we do not do is we're not a PPC shop. We don't do any kind of serious SEM programs. We don't do full scale demand gen. Primarily focusing on content and content production. That's our jam. We've been doing that for just over 2 years. And we work primarily in the B2B SaaS space and the health tech space. So those are the types of companies that we work with on an ongoing basis. And we also have a podcast for that. It's called B2B Content Marketing, the Content Callout. And we've had some amazing guests on, from Joe Palizzi to Robert Rose to Lindsay Chepkema. Like a bunch of amazing guests, and they've been incredible. And we've learned so much from them. And I'm really excited to hopefully share some of that information today on the show with you.
Great stuff. And I know that a good proportion of the listeners, or a significant one, I would say, come from these types of B2B backgrounds. So whether that is services, but specifically tech and software, there's been a couple of you guys emailing lately, I know, and health tech as well. I think would be also tech for education. I know we had a couple of conversations last week. So really great stuff. And hopefully you guys will be able to get some nice insights from our discussion today. And Mark, as you have this background in sales as well as negotiation, I didn't say to you in our previous discussion, but why not go into this area as well? Because as marketers, a negotiation happens at every point along the way, whether you are a marketer in an organization, you need more budget. And I know you had a podcast episode talking about, internal negotiations for that as well, or whether it's, negotiating with your internal teams from sales or financing or whatever else, we struggle with that, or we encounter that as well. So, negotiation and sales can also be good parallel discussion topics that we can touch upon whenever
absolutely.
You feel would be a good opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. And you know what? A lot of people, especially who come from a marketing background, don't immediately see the connection between marketing and negotiation, but they're actually really, really similar because both disciplines deal with influence and persuasion. And when you think of it from that perspective, we've both got the same foundational aspects into everything that we're doing, because we're trying to influence and persuade someone to do something on both sides. And so when I can break it down to its most fundamental levels, most marketers go, oh, okay, I get it. And I actually find that a lot of marketers are great negotiators. Once they can understand that there's a connection there, they're like, oh, okay, I understand what we're dealing with now. So yeah, happy to get into that discussion too.
Perfect. Okay, so first things first. Let's start from now and then go into case studies and the past and everything else. But how do you feel the B2B space as a whole has shifted or changed over the last 1 to 2 years? I won't say from the beginning of the pandemic, because some of the things were happening before in this space, white papers and all that, and content marketing to a certain degree. But do you feel there has been any particular change in approach across the board from the clients that you work with?
Fundamental shifts have been massive, right? I mean, especially if you think of any kind of budget dollars that were associated to trade shows moved to digital. So I think that is probably the biggest shift, although we've seen a big move back as well. Like a lot of companies are reinvesting back into trade shows, reinvesting back into conferences. And that's because if you do it right, those things work as well. So those are the big fundamental shifts. And what I think a lot of companies have found in the process of switching a lot of those dollars from trade shows and conferences to digital is that they realize, hey, the investment for digital is oftentimes significantly less than the investment for conferences and trade shows, and the ROI is about the same or better. And so when you think of it from that perspective, a lot of companies, I think, are still going to go back and add in a conference or a trade show here and there. Don't get me wrong. I think they're still really, really good for a well-rounded program. But I think that it's going to be less, and you're going to see a lot more companies invest in digital, especially when it comes to content and social, and trying to leverage social to the maximum like they can, because social is like a giant conference if you think about it, right? The interaction, the engagement, all of that is a lot of similarities to the conference world. So being able to leverage that is really, really important.
And going into the content production area, and maybe we can refer here to written content marketing. So having that SEO component, do you feel there has been an increasing competition here when it comes to more brands producing more content, maybe to a more professional standard?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been an increase in let me say there's been an increase in volume. Maybe not an increase in competition, but there's been certainly an increase in volume of content being produced. The upside for a lot of us in the content marketing space to that is it's given a lot of eyeballs to content marketing in general, right? People have started to realize the benefits of content marketing. And now there's a lot of people that realize, oh my goodness, I've got to be playing this game. The downside, of course, is that there's only one SERP, right? Depending on whatever keywords you're trying to rank for. So you've got more competition potentially. So the opportunity for category development is significantly higher in terms of like a blue ocean strategy. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And also the good thing is that it's allowed a lot of us who really invest in quality content, especially in the B2B space, to stand out, because anyone can throw words on the internet, but it takes a really good writing and editing team and a really good SEO platform to be able to make that writing count. So yes, there's been more competition, there's been more volume. I don't necessarily think it's hurt anyone who's been investing in it the right way, though.
And you touched upon something which I wanted to be one of our core discussion points, and that is becoming a category leader or creating your own category. So if you would like to talk about some of the examples that you had with clients when you were designing a strategy for this, because I think this may be relevant to at least 2 people that I know are listening to us and are in that sort of startup phase where they are putting the strategy together. And I just think this would be super relevant for anybody, but particularly I know two people that will appreciate us touching on this point.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of category creation, right? If you think of HubSpot with inbound, if you think of revenue intelligence, even Casted, which is a B2b podcasting platform, their category is amplified marketing. They basically created that category, and now everyone's talking about it. The thing that a lot of people really miss with category creation is the absolute requirement for volume and the absolute requirement for your ability to stick with it, because you're trying to create a category that no one is searching for right now, right? Like there are no eyeballs, right? So like if you're thinking of PPC, there's tons of people searching PPC. If you think of content marketing, there's tons of people searching content marketing. But if you're trying to create a whole new category, there is no one searching for that yet. So there's no search volume, which means that you have to create a lot of the search volume. So you have to be really, really on it with PR. You have to be really, really on it with the volume of content that you're producing. You have to do things like this, coming on shows to talk about the new category that you're creating and how it's different and why it's different and why people should pay attention. So your outbound push on what it is you want your category to appear like to the marketplace has to be very substantial and very sustained for a very long period of time, so that you can build up the search volume, so that you can start getting inbound, because there's no inbound, right? It's all outbound to begin with, so that you can get all of that inbound built over a period of years. And it's going to take a period of years.
So looking at it from a content marketing strategy point of view, this would be the long-term component to a content marketing strategy. Okay, good stuff. So do you think this would be something to be considered by anybody, or are there particular niches or types of business that you found this working better for in the B2B space?
Depends on what it is you're trying to, like if you're a consulting company, you're not creating a category, right? Like, I mean, let's be honest with each other. You're just not. You're a consulting company, so you have to compete on keywords that are already available. You're never going to be a Bain. You're never going to be a McKinsey. You're never going to be a BCG. So don't bother, right? Compete in your space and niche down. I would say be very niche on that space. But if you're a tech company and you have a new platform or a new product that changes the way that something is done, then it may make sense for you to create the category. And in creating that category, you've got to be really sure that that's something that you want to do, because it takes a very heavy investment. And if you've got investors, they're going to need to understand that, because they're going to want to see, like a traditional investor is going to want to see ROI fairly quickly, or at least growth fairly quickly. In creating a category, especially when it comes to outbound marketing, that growth is still a requirement, and you also still have to do all of the outbound stuff with no search volume, right? So when you think about that, it's a substantial investment that you're going to have to make. It's not something that I would easily recommend for everyone. Now, if you're willing to be patient and invest and do the right, like if you look at what Casted has done, for example, like Zachary and Lindsay over at Casted, Holly, who's their VP of marketing, they've done an amazing job, right? They've really built out the amplified marketing whole idea. They've built out that whole category, and now everyone's talking about it. I see Forbes articles about it and entrepreneur articles about it. And it was really them that created that category, and it'll continue to grow more and more and more. But it was really them that created that, and they're at the forefront of that category now. So people like you and I are searching amplified marketing. There's actually some search volume now, but it does take a lot of investment and a lot of time. So don't go into it lightly. For those of you that want to do this, just be very sure that it's something that you want to do.
Okay, super. And then, of course, if we go back to the theory of having your content organized into pillars and satellites and everything else, probably if we were to think about it from an integrated point of view, this can be a pillar, but it has to be that pillar that always stands and will be there for years, as you mentioned, Mark, to ensure that you build on top of it, but it will require a lot of resource because you need that volume. And then, having the other content pillars that will enable you to rank for some keywords or key phrases that do have search volume. So in the end, you are able to justify for the business internally, but also for the world, that the content marketing and SEO that you are doing actually gets people onto the website, the relevant people, and then proves, results to the business.
Yeah, and you bring up a really very important point, Andrei, and a lot of people don't think about this, is like you've still got to compete, because there's still search volume out there for something that you probably do, or part of something that you probably do. So you've still got to compete on that content too. So you're creating content for the new category, and you've got to compete on the existing keywords of the existing categories that are out there. So those pillar strategies are essential to that, breaking out a long form, 4,000, 5,000 word piece of pillar content and having that sort of hub and spoke model that you can create and do a lot of like internal and external links to create a lot of that inbound traffic is critical to your ongoing competitiveness. And again, something that you really do need to invest time and money and strategy into. And it seems like you thought very deeply about this, because a lot of people don't think about that. A lot of people don't think about the strategy that goes behind it. They think, well, I'm just going to start blogging and hopefully some of this stuff gets picked up. No, there has to be a significant strategy that you put into it, because you've got to think about, okay, well, who am I trying to reach, right? So the whole idea of who's my ideal customer profile, who are the target buyers within that ideal customer profile, who are the influencers to those target buyers, what are they searching for on an ongoing basis, how am I going to reach those people, and then how am I going to differentiate myself from my existing competition who I'm competing with on keywords, right? So not only do I have to rank, but it also has to be something that's good to read when you get to the website. Otherwise, bounce rate becomes super high. And then what's the point, right? Like, why would you rank? Congratulations, but no one reads it. The point is to get someone to read it, not just to rank. We want to get someone to read it as best we can, because when we get someone to read it, they get engaged and then they move into our funnel. So ideally, you want to get something that is really, really great readable content too.
And of course, long term, if we were to think about it, if you don't have a good retention on page and people just navigate 10% of your page and then they drop or leave, then that will damage your page authority in the long run. So, okay, you may be getting a great domain authority as time goes by, but that content that you struggle for may not rank for too long until it doesn't anymore, because another competitor may produce a better piece of content that targets those maybe key phrases, like the main key phrase that you target and you rank for.
Yeah, and it's not just about production, right? You've also got to distribute. And that's the second half to content marketing that most people don't think about, is like,
let's go into this one actually, because
sure,
I think this is very under discussed, I think, and I would really like to hear your thoughts on, you produce and then what happens.
Well, then you've got to have people read it, right? The quality, the strength of your content marketing is a function of two things. It's a function of the quality of the content that you're producing, and it's a function of the people reading that content. So you without people, you could write the best piece in the world, but if people don't read it, then it's useless, because the goal is to get people to read it. So the question then becomes, how do we get people to read it? Well, two different ways. One is organic distribution, right? SEO, social, all that kind of stuff. And the other one is paid distribution. So any kind of paid SEM or paid social work that you may end up doing. Most people post organically and then they're like, cool, we're good. But they don't invest in the paid distribution. And I would argue that a big part of your budget not only has to be around the content that the production budget, but the distribution budget as well. If you're not spending 50% of the budget on distributing the content, you're really missing an amazing opportunity, because you're not going to get organic search. Like, you're not going to rank right away, right? Like, it's not like you post it and then you're automatically page one. That just doesn't happen. So you've got to start that process with paid distribution. You've got to do paid social, you've got to do paid SEM. And without it, you're really missing a major opportunity to get people to read your stuff.
Have you found a direct link between investing, whether that is Google or social media, so direct budgets into, let's say, a blog post, but let's say a long form blog post, just to be sure that we have the quality element there. So investing or not investing budgets in a blog post and the speed at which it can increase ranking?
Substantial.
Yeah.
So we ran this experiment recently with our own stuff, where we created a long form piece, 4,000 words. It was a guide on a B2b marketing for SaaS companies, B2b content marketing for SaaS companies. It was a guide that we produced, and we made it ungated, and we did almost like a really rough A/B test. We posted on social with one post that looked a certain way, and we made it all organic, and really didn't get anywhere. And it was doing a little bit of ranking after 3 months, not anything substantial. And then we took that exact same post and just boosted it. Like, we didn't even put like an intense strategy behind it. We just boosted it on LinkedIn, because that's where all of our customers are. And the click-through rate was substantial. Like, we did very, very well on click-through rate, because we understand our customer. And the bounce rate went way down, because people knew what they were going to read, because they're coming in from social, and we ranked a lot faster. So now for the keywords that we're trying to rank for, which is content marketing for B2B SaaS companies, we're page one. Nice. And now what ends up happening is we've actually beat out our what we believe is our major competitor. I won't say their names on here. We've beat out our major competitor, and we rank higher than them. So we're number 5, page 1, within 2 months of doing that, versus 3 months of organic where it didn't really count. So a substantial difference that a result of paid marketing does to ranking as a result of that.
Nice. And would you be able or willing to share the budgets if somebody thinks about doing the same? What would be a budget that maybe you invested or thought would be good to start with, at least?
Man, it totally depends on what you're trying to rank for. Because I mean, if you're trying to look, if you've got a consulting company and you're a management or let's just choose the obvious one, right? Like, let's just say you have a dental practice, and you're trying to rank for dentist practice in your city or whatever it might be, the competition is massive, right? So I would say have a good SEO strategy on where you want to rank and why you want to rank there, and choose less competitive keywords where you think you're going to get better quality inbound as a result of those less competitive keywords. And don't be afraid to go long tail, because you know what a perfect customer is going to search for. So for example, in our case, we know that we really only want to speak to people or talk to people that are in B2B SaaS. And we really only want to speak to people in B2B SaaS who are searching for content marketing. So our long tail is content marketing for B2B SaaS. And so the result of that, of course, is yes, we may miss out on a lot of higher search volume, but the search volume that we do get is better quality. And so we're able to compete on those keywords and then do much better. Now, if you're in a very competitive industry, it's going to cost you significantly more, and your budget's going to be more. Now, it doesn't cost us very much. I mean, maybe we spend $1,000, $2,000 a month on any kind of paid distribution of our content, but that's because we're being very strategic about the keywords that we're trying to rank for, and where we're trying to rank in general. But if you sell cacti, and there's 1,000 cacti companies in the world that are, or in your area that are doing exactly what you do, your competition is going to be fierce. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. It doesn't have to be substantial. That's what a lot of people don't understand. Like, when the people hear $2,000, they're like, oh, that's not that much money. You're like, yeah, it doesn't have to be, right? Like, you pick out the keywords that make sense for your organization and who you're trying to target, and work with those to begin with. Go from there.
Great insight. Thank you. Okay, and talking content marketing now, one of the big differences between content marketing and PPC, for example, as we all know, is that with content marketing, mainly if we talk about written content marketing, you need patience to see some results. I mean, they can come sooner or later. Sometimes it takes longer depending on the competition, depending on the topic as well. But it may take a bit longer, whereas with PPC, you can present pretty soon some initial results. What are some, I don't know, maybe funny stories or maybe challenges that you encountered in your discussions with decision makers, let's say, in presenting content market or getting content marketing strategies or plans approved?
The thing is if you're working with marketers, it's never a problem, right? Because marketers get it. So if you say to them, look, we're probably not going to rank for this for at least 8 to 12 months, they're like, okay, cool. But they understand that after that 8 to 12 months, you're going to, as long as you're maintaining that page on a regular-ish basis, as long as you're updating it, as long as your technical SEO is good on your website, you're going to probably maintain that position or improve it over time, right? You're going to do very, very well over time. Whereas, unfortunately, for a lot of people who aren't in marketing, they expect immediate results for SEO, and then they're surprised when those immediate results don't happen. And I don't think it's their fault. I think it's actually our fault as marketers, because we have done a poor job of communicating the differences between SEO and SEM. And we've done a poor job of communicating the differences between all of the things that we're doing within each of those major segments and why we're doing them. And if you follow up and make a logical argument of here's what we're doing in all these different areas, here's why we're doing each of these things, here's why it's not an either or situation. It's not like I would never say to someone, choose SEM over SEO, or like choose PPC over content. They're not mutually exclusive. You should be doing both things. But our decision makers are going to say to us, well, you have to choose one or the other because the budget is limited, right? And so you have to make a decision. I would much rather you take a smaller budget for both and try and do both, rather than pick one or the other, because the SEM is going to get you the short-term results that you need in terms of the whatever SEM strategy you're trying to run. And the SEO strategy that you're building, or the content marketing strategy that you're building, is going to be the long-term results that create all of the inbound traffic, or a lot of the inbound traffic, over a period of years. So, but our decision makers don't know that. So we have to have a logical argument of why they should do something. Then we have to say to them, well, here's why we should do it, and here's why it matters to our organization. So you've got to tell them, like, what's the benefit to them, and then you've got to be able to be credible enough to be able to carry that organization. If you've screwed up the marketing budget for the last 3 years in a row, no one's going to trust you anyway. So just making sure you hit those 3 points is critical.
Great stuff. Okay, so now going into or touching a bit more on thought leadership. So we saw in B2B this is being done in a couple of ways. So what we do here, podcasts, is one of them. Then we have the interviews, roundtables, white papers as well for SaaS. This is a very common practice. What are some of the strategies that work well for you guys, for your clients, or some of the things that, you know, like the hidden secrets that you can share, of course, not all of them, that you think would be worth looking at from somebody that activates in this niche?
I think it depends on what you want to achieve. So if you're, depending on where I think you need to hit all 3 major stages of whatever your funnel is, right? So awareness, consideration, and action, or awareness, consideration, and intent, however you want to look at those big 3 parts of the funnel. I think a lot of people are really good at creating awareness-based content, but consideration content is where a lot of people really struggle. So white papers, case studies, all that kind of stuff, I think really comes into a lot of that middle piece of the funnel. So I would say as a hedge, I wouldn't go a third, a third, a third. I would maybe go a quarter and then 2 quarters and a quarter for the bottom. And have your intent content be the same sort of set volume of content you're producing as your awareness content. I would spend more time in the consideration phase, because that's where most people are going to be you're going to be helping most people to make a decision. And then don't be afraid to make sure that you're developing content for other sites as well. So a lot of guest posting, a lot of backlinking, any kind of Reddit posts where you want to be available, social media, be very present on social media. Those are the major areas where I think you should be focusing.
Okay. And when you say, social media, do you see it just as a medium of distribution for the written or visual content that you produce, or are there other strategies that you currently implement in the B2B space and seem to be working very well? And we can talk channels as well here, like if you have insights from Quora already that you think would be relevant.
I think a lot of it comes down to engagement. Yes, distribution of the content that you have, but engaging on the comments of that content. So a big part of that's where we spend, that's the vast majority of hours, the labor hours in our business for our clients where we run social media for them, is based on the engagement. Because that's where the quality of conversation improves, and that's where the consideration begins. So yes, you post something on social for awareness, but that's only awareness. If someone engages on that, they're considering something. Could be anything, just could be part of the conversation, but that's where the consideration begins for a lot of people. And then they're going to say, well, I'm going to share this with someone on a Slack channel, or I'm going to share this with someone on a text, or I'm going to share this with someone on something else. And that's where you're going to get a lot of the engagement beginning. So I would say focus on engagement more than distribution on social, and try and create as much engagement as you can. So especially when it comes to social, make sure your first few lines are really, really good, right? That there's a hook. Like, why should someone read this? There's some interesting stuff that someone wants to read. We look at it through 3 lenses. So is it educational? Is it entertaining? Is it interesting? If you can hit at least 2 out of 3 of those, you're in a good spot. And remember that your audience is looking for something that's going to stop them scrolling. And that's what we're trying to do. So that first couple of lines has to be a scroll stopper. And then you can start getting into the conversation and then engage people on social. So if someone has liked it, where someone is one of the target audience that you're looking for, tag them in the comments and say, hey, I saw that you liked this. Would love to hear your feedback on it. At whatever that person's name is.
So it's a lot of proactive work as well in getting engaged.
It has to be. People think that social is passive. It's very active. Like you have to be very, very, very active. And there's a big downside to that, because it just takes hours. It takes a lot of time. A lot of time.
What's your experience with groups? LinkedIn, maybe even Facebook?
I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of LinkedIn groups. I think they used to be something that was good. I haven't seen anyone being active on LinkedIn
not anymore.
Groups. Like at least not for 2 years, 3 years, maybe. Facebook groups, it depends on who's running the group. I find if someone's doing regular inbound into that group, meaning they're constantly building the audience and engaging the audience on an ongoing basis, and it's purely educational for that group, it can be amazing and it can be incredible. It depends on who's running that group. But LinkedIn has really sucked for the last 3 years.
But they are kind of following in Facebook's footsteps. So maybe if Facebook is focusing a lot on groups these days, maybe they will want to work something out. I don't know. I was just curious here because we have a lot of success with LinkedIn groups lately. So I was just curious,
Oh, you've had success with LinkedIn groups?
No, not much. I mean, we had a couple of trials, nothing really popped out. So we were like, okay, fine.
Yeah, I think especially if you're creating a category, going back to that conversation, the strength of the group is based on the strength of the community that you're building. And there's better community tools than a LinkedIn group. right? So like creating a Slack channel, for example. So if we're going to make the comparison, like why have a group is to create the community, in my opinion, right? That's why you have a group. So I would much rather be investing my dollars in creating a small Slack community, like an active Slack community, than I would in a LinkedIn group. Like there's really no reason I would create a LinkedIn group these days.
Okay, agree with that. Oh, okay. Another question that I had here. I'm bombarding you, so if you want to ask back, I'm here. But having your background as a, more of a in the sales direction, and content marketing in B2B being a lot linked to the ability of that content to generate leads or sales qualified leads in general. How do you how do your clients find how do you find your clients make the choice in gating or not some of the content?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think it's an either or. I don't think, like, everyone's like, oh, there's a big trend lately to say something to the effect of never gate content. And then you've got other people that are like, no, you should always gate content. And I think it depends on why you're building the content in the first place. So if you're doing it to get ranked, and if you're doing it to build up your rank overall, and if you want people to read it on an ongoing basis, and it's a pillar piece of content, I don't think you should gate it. I think that's something that you need to drive traffic to, that you need to constantly develop and build. But if you've got a really technical white paper that is really important for your business, like a lot of crypto businesses have really deep technical algorithms that they don't want to share publicly with anyone else because it's really important. That gating is really, really important because it gets people who are interested in learning about the technology to download the white paper, or at least to have a conversation with someone to learn more about the white paper. So I think it really depends on why you're doing what you're doing. I don't think it's an either or conversation. I think you can have both. And I think for a lot of companies, it makes sense to have both.
Agree.
Ungated and gated.
One way that we found was working well for some of our clients was maybe for you guys that are looking at refreshing your content marketing strategy for the summer or for the second part of the year. I very much agree with you, Mark. And what we are doing at the moment is working out from the content plan. What is it, as you mentioned, like what can drive real SEO benefits? So what of the subjects that we are looking to include or are linked to keywords or key phrases that have either a very targeted search volume, so they are really relevant to the business, or have a higher search volume, but it's also very feasible for us to want to rank for within the next 3 to 6 months. So for those ones, we would create content, even long form, that is not gated, but then in producing industry status reports or these types of things that are very insightful for a decision maker maybe, but there's not a high volume of searches on those specific keywords. Those can be gated, or you can create an excerpt, maybe like 1,000 words summary, and then for somebody that wants to go in more depth, hey, you can download this if whatever, leave your details or business info, and then
totally agree.
Yeah, awesome. Man, this was a very good chat, and we did it in a record amount of time.
Well, you're an interesting guy, man. You've got great questions.
Well, and you have great answers, so I think it's a match. Great stuff. So what are you guys planning for the rest of the year now, as to wrap up the episode and maybe get some inspiration from our discussion to our public that maybe the guys tuning in today can start to integrate, look at for the coming months?
For us personally, for our business, a big part of what we're doing is trying to make sure that our sales and our marketing engines are in tandem, and just making sure that marketing is arming sales with all of the things that they need to do their outbound work and their inbound work. and then making sure that they're set up for success. So just that sales and marketing alignment is a big deal for us for the next couple of months. We've recently hired a couple of new salespeople, so we want to make sure that they've got everything they need to be successful. And the blurred lines, especially in the BDR roles between sales and market, it's so blurred now where we're almost the same, because a good BDR person is going to be a good copywriter, and a good copywriter is generally a good marketer. And so I think we're going to see more alignment over time. And the other thing that we're really focused on for this year is just making sure that we're active on social as much as we can, because we really think that that's going to be our long-term success, at least for non-owned organic stuff. That's where we really want to play very well. So that's going to be big for us.
Great stuff. Thank you. Okay, and finally, for Content Callout, tell us a bit about what you guys are doing exactly with companies. If we have people in here that would like to have discussions with you, or connect and ask you questions.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So if you listen to this show and you want to connect with me, please do connect with me on LinkedIn. You can just search my name on LinkedIn, Mark Raffan, or you can go to our website. That's contentcallout.com. And I've got a gift for everyone who's listening. If you are interested in pursuing content marketing in some sort of way, and you know that your company needs to invest in this, and maybe this is something that you've already got freelancers, but you're like, hey, maybe we should try an agency, we will be happy to provide you with a custom tailored 1,000-word blog post completely free of charge if you listen to this podcast and you tell us that you heard us on this podcast. So please do reach out if you have anything.
Much appreciation. Thank you, Mark. Okay, guys. So you'll have details to Mark's LinkedIn profile as well as to the Content Callout platforms in the description of this episode. And of course, feel free to reach out to Mark directly if you have any questions that you think we can answer to or help in linking you guys. As always, feel free to email us, ping us on social, or write me directly, as well as any other questions or recommendations for future episodes. Mark, I feel this was a great episode. So if you're up for another debate sometime this year,
let's do it.
Yeah, awesome. So let us know, guys. Thank you, Mark, for today. This was a really nice chat. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. Guys, thank you as always for tuning in and for being with us. Looking forward to your feedback and for thoughts on the episode. And until next time, hoping this got a bunch of value to your marketing plans, to your content marketing activity, and keep rock and rolling. Have a nice one and keep up the good work.